Hey guys, Pastor John back here with another Thursday Thought. This week we are wrapping up our series on the Sermon on the Mount. We've been looking at what it means to truly flourish, to have true life. Jesus has been laying that out for us in the Sermon on the Mount. And this week we're wrapping it up with chapter 7, 21 through 29. And at the very beginning of the passage, he says something that seems a bit harsh. He says that not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, is going to enter into the kingdom, is going to enter into heaven. So in other words, not everyone who claims to know Jesus is actually known by Jesus. And so it seems kind of harsh, but I think it's easy for us to maybe understand that concept. We see lots of people who maybe say that they believe certain things, or they do certain actions to kind of present this image or portray this belief, and it's not consistent with what else is going on in their life. And so I think that's what Jesus is saying here. Is there's people that may call me Lord. They may do some of the things that I want them to do. They may look a certain way on the outside, but I don't actually know them. And then he goes into this idea of two builders. And we saw last week this idea of two different things. We had the narrow gate and the wide gate. We had the good tree, the bad tree, right? And so Jesus is continuing that with a wise builder and a foolish builder. But I want to point out verse 24 to you. He says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Well, the interesting thing there is in the original Greek, it reads more like this. It says, everyone who hears me, these words, and does them, then finishes the rest of that verse. Well, that means that what Jesus says is a perfect 100% representation of who he is. And unfortunately for us, we know that as people, we don't always line up. What we say doesn't always line up with what we believe or how we act, right? We lie, we deceive, we tell, we exaggerate. Sometimes we just forget things, right? So a lot of times what we say doesn't line up with who we are. But that's not the case for Jesus. What he says perfectly lines up with who he is. And so when you hear his words, you are seeing him. That's who Jesus is. And so he's saying that you need to actually do what is being said, right? And so we've got these two builders. We've got the wise builder does what Jesus says, and he builds on the rock, the solid foundation, and when storms come, it stands firm. But the foolish builder builds on sand. And when the storms come, it crashes, right? And so you've got these two opposing things again, and Jesus is telling us to decide. Are you going to merely hear the words of Jesus and then just do your own thing? Or are you going to truly hear the words of Jesus by doing what he says? Now, we probably, if you're a spouse, if you have a spouse or if you have kids, you've probably experienced this, where you're telling somebody something, you're talking to somebody, and it doesn't look like they're really paying attention. And you're like, are you listening to me? And they're like, yeah, I heard you. And they kind of regurgitate some of the stuff that you said. Well, we all know that they may have heard the words you were saying, but if they were truly listening, they would have responded. They would have done what you asked, right? And that's what Jesus is saying. If you truly hear Jesus' words, you're going to do what he says. You're going to build your life on the rock, that strong foundation. And when things come, now interesting thing here, right? Both of the builders had storms come. Both of them had the waves crashing against their homes, their houses. But the wise builder who built on the rock was able to withstand that. And the foolish one wasn't able to. So it kind of points back to the wide road and the narrow road. The narrow road leads to life. The wide road leads to destruction. And we're seeing that same destruction by building on the sand. And so Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount with basically a decision. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with the words that I've told you? Are you going to realize that what I'm saying is who I am? It's a perfect representation of who I am and what I want you to do and what true life looks like, what true flourishing looks like. And are you going to do those things? Or are you going to be foolish and are you going to build all of your hope and your success and your foundation on the sand, which is going to lead you to destruction? So consider that this week. Also want to remind you, we've got a brand new book for our next series on 1 Samuel. If you don't have one of these yet, come and see me, grab one of these books. But we'll see you next time. Love God, love others, serve generously. See you later.